Welcome to our presentation for the Sonoma Valley Groundwater Sustainability Agency on declining groundwater in Sonoma Valley and what we as a local community and agency partners can do. In this presentation, we'll cover a few topics. We'll cover what the Sonoma Valley Groundwater Sustainability Agency is and what's our role in the basin and in the valley. We will also talk about the ongoing groundwater level declines in Sonoma Valley, and we'll address potential solutions to recover groundwater levels in the valley. So what's the Sonoma Valley GSA? Well, first, the Sonoma Valley Groundwater Sustainability Agency was created to comply with California's 2015 Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, and the agency was created in 2017. And as you can see on this slide, on our right-hand slide where you see the map, you can see the outline of the Sonoma Valley Groundwater Sustainability Agency service area, the basin, in this sort of whitish area. And it's got a dotted line on the outside of it. That's the area that is under the jurisdiction of the GSA. And then this more solid line on the outside shows the total area of the watershed that serves that basin. And then you can see also the other groundwater sustainability agencies are outlined on this map as well, the Petaluma and the Santa Rosa Plain. So let's talk a little bit about our water supply and the use of water in the valley. On this slide on the left, you can see that groundwater is the largest single supply of water in the valley, followed by the Russian River system, which serves our urban water uses in the Valley of the Moon Water District and also the city of Sonoma. Recycled water comes in third, and then in-basin surface water, that's diversions out of creeks and streams, and also storage on site in reservoirs on private lands. So that kind of talks about our sort of displays our supply of water. On the right-hand side, you can see the uses of water, starting from 12 o'clock on this chart. You can see ecosystems. That's our plants and animals and wildlife, the use that use our streams and waters, and then you can see next is agriculture. Agriculture is a big user of water. Businesses, there's processed water used for commercial use. We've got city residents. There is some groundwater pumped for municipal use. And then we have rural residential, and that's our folks who live on parcels that are out in the unincorporated Sonoma County area. So those are our primary beneficial users of groundwater. So this chart, pie chart, shows groundwater use by user type, and you can see that agriculture is the largest user of water at 59%. These are approximate numbers, but around 59%. Small public water systems at 8% and rural residential at 15% are other smaller users, but still a sizable amount. Urban irrigation and turf, including the golf course, comes in at 10%. And then we have Valley of the Moon Water District, which pumps some groundwater to supplement their supplies from the Russian River. And then we have commercial use as well at 5%, rounding it out. So here are our steps to sustainability. I mentioned earlier that the Groundwater Sustainability Agency was formed in June of 2017. We developed a groundwater sustainability plan to get us to sustainability in the basin, and that was approved by the Department of Water Resources in 2022. And then based on that plan, we have 20 years after the adoption and approval of that plan to achieve sustainability. And for us, that's in 2042. So what can the GSA do? What authorities do we have? Well, we can charge fees. We can require well registration and metering. We can limit extractions, and we can acquire land and facilities for sustainability projects. Currently, we're just doing the first bullet here. We're charging fees. but we do have the ability to do the other three. What can't we do? Well, we can't require meters for typical residential groundwater users. That's your rural residential, small parcels, single-family homes out in the unincorporated area. We're not going to be requiring meters for that, nor are we allowed to. And then we also don't make land use decisions about growth and development in the valley. That's handled by our municipal partner, the city of Sonoma, and then the county of Sonoma in the unincorporated areas. They have the land use jurisdiction. We're also not responsible for issuing well permits. That's done by the county as well. And then we are not responsible for maintaining or fixing or drilling wells on private property or public property. We don't do well maintenance and drilling. So this is a little bit about our current funding situation for our sustainability efforts. We charge groundwater fees, per acre foot charge in the basin, and that generates about $260,000 a year. We receive both this year and then the subsequent 2 years in the future, we receive a $500,000 contribution from the county of Sonoma to offset our groundwater fees and help maintain those fees in line with the other groundwater basins in the county. And then the city of Sonoma contributes $25,000 a year, although they do not have any wells within the basin. They do have a strong interest in seeing us succeed in our work, and we are very grateful that the city contributes this money to help in our sustainability efforts. And last but not least, we've been quite successful in receiving grant funding over the history of the agency. We've received over $5 million in grant funding, and over the next several years, our grant funding is about $637,000 a year. And our goal is quite simply to adaptively and sustainably manage, protect, and enhance groundwater resources in Sonoma Valley to ensure clean and plentiful groundwater for the community and environment now and for future generations. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to our plan manager, Marcus Trotta, who will talk about the ongoing groundwater level declines in Sonoma Valley. And I'm turning it over to you, Marcus.
Great, thank you, Bill. Thanks for the introduction. As Bill mentioned, I serve as plan manager for the Sonoma Valley GSA, essentially directing our technical work. I've been working on Sonoma Valley groundwater issues for the past 15 years, where I serve as a principal hydrogeologist at Sonoma Water. So my goal here is to describe a serious yet very solvable problem related to declining groundwater levels occurring in Sonoma Valley. While there will be challenges in fixing this problem, unlike other groundwater basins with more significant problems in the state and limited solutions, we will be describing a number of proven solutions available to our region, which all groundwater users can be a part of. I'm going to start by describing what the problem is and what we know about it. So starting out with how we gauge the health of our groundwater basin, the state requires that these 6 sustainability indicators be addressed and regularly measured by GSAs for signs of impacts. For most indicators, we are not currently seeing evidence of concerns. However, we do lack information and data for some, particularly surface water depletion and seawater intrusion, which the GSA is currently focused on addressing through some of the grant-funded data collection you can learn more about on our website. The problems we are experiencing in Sonoma Valley are related to the ongoing and chronic declines in groundwater levels and the related reduction in the amount of groundwater stored in the basin. Before describing the areas where we are seeing the problems and the data we have, I'd like to start with a very short Groundwater 101. This figure shows a very idealized depiction of an aquifer system. While our local geology, which forms the aquifers in Sonoma Valley, is much more complex due to the ancient volcanic activity and faulting that's occurred in the valley, This picture does illustrate the general way that groundwater behaves here. So starting with groundwater being part of the overall hydrologic cycle, rainfall that falls on the earth will either run off to a surface water body or infiltrate into the soil. A portion of the water that infiltrates will be sucked up by the roots of plants and evapotranspired back out into the atmosphere. The water that makes it past the root zone will eventually recharge our groundwater aquifers. The shallow aquifer system pointed to here can recharge relatively quickly after rains and plays an important role in supporting folks with shallower wells and our local streams and habitat because groundwater and surface water are closely connected. The deeper aquifer system is typically separated from the shallow aquifer system by low permeability clays or volcanics and can take much longer to directly recharge. And this is where we are observing the declines in groundwater levels, which we are focusing on here today. The Groundwater Sustainability Agency has mapped those areas where we are seeing the problems occur as shown in red on this map. The two groundwater sustainability priority areas that have been mapped are the El Verano priority area and the Eastside priority area. We've mapped these areas based on available data on groundwater levels, geology, groundwater use, and the susceptibility of people's wells to be impacted. Here I'll show some of the data that was used. This map shows the locations of deep aquifer system wells which have monitoring data within the last 10 to 15 years sufficient enough to establish a statistical trend. The red and orangish colors are wells which have declining trends. You can see that the east side area has the most significant declining conditions, particularly true east of the east side fault, where several wells have been declining over 5 feet per year, resulting in groundwater levels dropping to over 200 feet in some areas. These two graphs show examples of the data behind the trend calculations, with the 10 to 15-year rate of change displayed with the blue trend line, along with the amount of overall change for the entire period of measurement. You can view this data and more that on our website. We have the GSA's website through our groundwater data dashboard. As many of the graphs indicate, these declines are decades in the making and are a troubling sign of an aquifer that is out of balance. More groundwater is being pumped out of the aquifer on average than is going into the aquifer. It's also important to understand that this is not a problem that can be solved by a few wet years. While water levels in Sonoma Valley's shallow aquifer respond quickly during rainy periods, the deep aquifer takes much longer to recover. So the main cause for the declines in groundwater pumping that exceeds the rate The main cause for the declines is groundwater pumping that exceeds the rate of natural replenishment. This map shows our estimates of the distribution of water use by water use sector. In these two areas, our estimates are that 50% of groundwater is used for agricultural irrigation, approximately 20% is used for turf irrigation, including the golf course, approximately 15% is used for municipal supplies by the Valley of the Moon Water District, and approximately 15% is used by rural residential users. Overpumping of groundwater in these areas is also exacerbated by the geologic conditions of these two areas, including clay-rich, low permeability geologic formations and the east side fault, which may serve as a local barrier to groundwater flow. This is a problem that will get worse as the climate changes. Climate models predict that future droughts will be longer and more frequent and that rain will come in fewer, more intense storms. The water from heavy storms is more likely to run off into creeks and streams rather than sink into the soil where it eventually ends up in the aquifer. During drought and warmer periods, a higher proportion of groundwater is also pumped as more water is typically needed for irrigation and less is available from surface water, including imported water deliveries from the Russian River system. So the most significant impacts of falling groundwater levels occurring in the valley is on people's wells. This map shows the locations where impacts to wells have already been reported to the county or state. Groundwater levels falling below the operational pumping depths of existing wells causes impacts on groundwater users, such as increased pumping costs, reduced pumping capacity, or the need to drill new, deeper wells. While drilling deeper wells may be the only solution for individual users, it won't solve the overall problem and could make things worse. Drilling deeper in our region can also encounter lower yields and poorer water quality. Other impacts that could occur while our existing data does not indicate that seawater intrusion or land surface subsidence are occurring within these areas, the ongoing declining groundwater levels provide the potential for these other costly problems to occur in the future if they are not abated. Information and data that we are collecting from ongoing studies and monitoring will further inform us on the relative risks for these impacts to occur. So in order to start thinking about how to best solve the problem, we need to have an idea of how much groundwater needs to be conserved, offset, or replenished across the subbasin. In some ways, managing a groundwater basin sustainably is similar to managing a household budget, where the amount we have available to spend annually is estimated to be approximately 5,400 acre-feet, which is the sustainable yield for the subbasin or the amount of groundwater that can be extracted on an average annual basis without causing undesirable results. 1 acre-foot equates to approximately 326,000 gallons of water. Our current best estimate for what we are spending or extracting from the subbasin is approximately 6,500 acre-feet, indicating that we're overdrafting by approximately 1,100 acre-feet per year. Bringing this budget back into balance can be accomplished through a combination of either increasing the amount available to spend through projects that increase the amount of recharge, thereby increasing the sustainable yield, and 2, reducing our spending by conserving water or offsetting groundwater usage with other available supply sources, such as wintertime surface water or recycled water. While this is a challenging problem to solve, the good news is that unlike other areas of the state where the problems are more significant and solutions are limited, we have a number of proven solutions available to us. This is the focus of the last part of our presentation. So I will start by describing the types of long-term solutions that are being considered by the GSA, and Indigo Bannister, the GSA's administrative coordinator, will describe some of the existing and voluntary grant-funded programs available for you to start being part of the solution now, as we know this community can be very innovative and creative in coming up with and adopting solutions to problems. Because stabilizing and reversing those declining groundwater levels is a high priority, the GSA is currently conducting a focused evaluation of the potential cost and benefit of different projects and actions to ensure that the GSA's limited resources are spent most effectively. I'm going to give you a very high-level overview of the projects and actions being considered as part of this evaluation. You can get more information on these projects and programs on the GSA's website. I'll also provide our current best estimate for the range of potential savings for each. These estimates are continuing to be refined as we gather more information from ongoing pilot studies and data collection over the coming months. So starting with expanding water conservation offerings to groundwater users in these areas. We know from highly successful conservation programs in the urban areas where water conservation funding has been available that significant reductions can be achieved in many water use sectors, and water use incentives and conservation offerings have historically not been available to rural landowners. Another potential solution would be installing flow meters on wells to allow people to better understand and to conserve based on improved awareness of water use and leak detection. It is important to remember, as Bill noted, that a mandatory program could not be required on typical rural residential wells. However, we do have a voluntary flow metering program available to all users, which Indigo will be describing later. Expanding recycled water pipelines to allow farmers and other groundwater users to use recycled water instead of groundwater to irrigate crops or landscaping is another important solution. The current average use of approximately 1,100 acre-feet of recycled water in the valley has already helped address historical groundwater level declines in the Carneros area. And the GSA is currently partnering with the sanitation district in planning and designing expansion of that network to optimize groundwater benefits in the east side groundwater sustainability priority area. Aquifer storage and recovery is another proven technology that would utilize wet season drinking water from the Russian River system for underground storage through wells directly into our aquifers for use when needed to offset pumping of our native groundwater. 2 successful pilot studies have been performed in the sub-basin, one in the city of Sonoma and another in the El Verano area by the Valley of the Moon Water District. This method could directly target the deep aquifer system where the problems are occurring. Projects that enhance recharge of local wintertime surface water supplies to help replenish the groundwater system are also being looked at. Managed aquifer recharge of stormwater on vineyards has been done in other areas of the state and is currently being piloted in other areas of the county. This method would likely provide more benefit to the shallow aquifer system and interconnected surface water versus the deeper aquifer system. One thing we know is that no single solution, as you can see by these estimates, and remembering that we have about 1,100 acre-feet to offset, is that no single solution will solve the problem on its own. And these projects and management actions will also have different costs and feasibility hurdles that are also being evaluated. Some other policies and programs that would reduce, offset, or limit groundwater use and help address impacts that could be considered by the GSA include well permitting and land use permitting changes, such as considering options for limiting or mitigating permitting of new groundwater uses within the priority areas through potential well permitting changes. It's important to note that this would solely address future additional use and would also require very close coordination with the county, as the GSA does not have those authorities as Bill had laid out. Another option is to encourage or incentivize use of other available alternative water sources. For example, encouraging or incentivizing use of imported Russian River system water, local stormwater, or rainwater where available. Other basins in the state with significant problems have established groundwater allocation programs to distribute the sustainable yield to groundwater users and limit groundwater extraction. Most of these areas have included a ramp down period to allow users to adapt to any limits and have also established methods to quantify annual changes in water use at the parcel scale. Some areas with allocations are also piloting groundwater trading systems to allow low water users to virtually share their groundwater with higher use neighbors. Finally, while it won't solve the problem, some areas where hundreds of domestic wells have been affected by groundwater conditions, GSAs are establishing well impact mitigation programs. Hearing your interest and ideas on all of these potential solutions will help the GSAs make decisions that are best for our local community. With that, I will turn it over to Indigo.
Thanks, Marcus. In addition to the solutions that Marcus mentioned, we wanted to highlight 4 community programs that are available for you to participate in now. These are programs that are focused on filling data gaps, providing the GSAs with a better understanding of groundwater conditions and use, and are also piloting programs to inform future potential projects with real data from our basin, such as some of the projects that Marcus mentioned. You'll be able to learn more about all of these programs on our website. First up, we have our Level Up, which is a voluntary well monitoring program where the GSA provides well owners with equipment to monitor their own groundwater levels twice a year. Next, we have our Seawater Intrusion Monitoring Program, where we are sampling wells near the baylands for water quality indicators of seawater intrusion. Next, we have the Well Aware program. We're providing education and tools for water conservation focused on groundwater users, which it could pilot a future expanded water use efficiency program, as Marcus described. And finally, we have our Flow Smart program, which is a voluntary metering program where the GSA will install a free well meter to better understand water use in the basin. And this could pilot a future potential expanded voluntary or mandatory program, as Marcus described. We know that these programs are just the beginning. Declining groundwater levels is not an issue that any one person or any one groundwater user group can solve on their own. It is going to take the collective effort by all water users in Sonoma Valley to get to long-term sustainability, but there is a clear way, there are clear solutions for how we can get there. We hope all of you that are here watching this will be a part of that solution. And you can find out more about all of the ways that you can be a part on our website. So thank you all for participating, and thank you all for listening to this. And we look forward to continuing to work together. Thank you.